Hey, people out there on the internet, this is David Rovix coming to you again on a Friday Pacific time. It's the morning, 10 a.m., 1 p.m. Eastern, and currently with the current time change situation, 5 p.m. in England. And this is Discussions with David, which comes to you every for Wednesday and Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Goes out on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. And if you are watching on one of those platforms and you might like to share the window and tell other folks this is happening live right now, then feel free. And we'll be talking for an hour here. And it'll be archived afterwards on youtube.com/drovix and anywhere you get your podcasts if you look for This Week with David Rovix. And today I'm very happy to be spending the hour with a musician, a songwriter, a man I've been admiring for the past 20 years since I first heard his music when I first toured Britain. And this is a phenomenal songwriter named TV Smith, founder of the band The Adverts back in 1976, and he's been touring and recording many albums all over the place since then. And with no further ado, I'm just going to get TV Smith on the screen. It's great to have you here, TV.
Hi,
And
David. Really nice to see you. Nice to chat with you.
your latest album, Lockdown Holiday, as you say on your website, was an unexpected thing. You were planning on, I think everybody, all the musicians I know, actually, who were planning on doing spring tours in 2020 had really good tours lined up. And that may be just like the fish that got away, but I had a really good tour lined up too. And
Mm.
I know you did. And that all went to hell. And then you got COVID-19 and have been holed up in your home most of the time since then and writing amazing songs and recording a fantastic album. And I mean, that's just, I'm summarizing the past year in one sentence. So, we can unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, the year
Yeah.
didn't seem to go quite as quick as you've as you've
Yeah.
compressed it
I
down.
didn't think I'd like cover from 1976 to the present in one sentence. Okay, we're
Yeah,
done now.
well, I'm done. So, yeah, it was good to chat with you. I'm off.
But actually, I would love to start with going way back, actually, because, well, first of all, I mean, just I mean, I've been a fan of your music for a very long time, but I've also when you started performing and touring, I was only 9 years old in 1976, and basically for anybody that is into punk rock, that was a fairly iconic period of time, and you were in a fairly iconic place as well, being in England at the time, and I just love the name of the band. The Adverts just seems to like capture the whole punk rock ethos in so many ways. And then I just wonder. This isn't much of a question, but what I mean, it's a really stupid question in a way. But what was the scene actually like in the late '70s and the mid '70s in the punk rock scene? I mean, for real, for somebody who was actually there. I mean, that's a really broad, open-ended question, I know, but uh, was it? What did you know you were in the midst of a cultural phenomenon that was really significant, or did it not feel like that at all at the time?
I don't know. I was 18,
Yeah.
so or 19 maybe. I mean, I'm just approaching 65 in a couple of weeks. So it is a long time ago, but it is kind of like the atmosphere and the feeling of the whole period is crystal clear. But the thing is, when you're at that age, you're at such an intense part of your own life. It's like saying, do you realize how significant it is to be 19 years old when you're 19? No, of course you don't.
Right.
You have no idea, but what an age, what a time with everything buzzing around in your head and all this stuff exploding, in your own kind of body and consciousness. And, in a way, the punk rock scene for me was a reflection of that. It was this massive thing happening, but, I never thought it would be so kind of iconic and so important in so many people's lives. I was just trying to express myself in the end, basically. I like words, I like tunes, I like making songs. I'd already learned how to do that. I was writing songs for quite a few years before the Adverts came along. And it just all kind of coalesced into one thing. I think, this feeling of, this atmosphere in the world and in Britain, and the age I was, and the desire to make music. It just all kind of imploded or exploded at the same time. But it was a very exciting time for music. And music had become so bloated and so self-indulgent, and so I think the most significant thing was that it wasn't something ordinary kids could access, apart from being a consumer. It wasn't something you could yourself go out and do. I'd tried bands before. I couldn't, I couldn't get beyond the village hall. it, it,
There was a
there
real
was no
reaction to
way
the
between,
glitz.
no bridge between me and the music I was making and the
Right.
music they were making, on the record labels and on Top of the Pops and all that. And ironically, 6 months after I started the band, I was on Top of the Pops. I had a label, and I was in the most significant, change and in music that had happened for many years. So, it was very strange the way it all happened at that point. And
That
I
is
guess
ironic, isn't it? I mean, I guess music historically has gone through a lot of sort of similar phases where some form of music becomes really established that used to be less not an establishment thing, and then it becomes really glitzy and really I guess the classic example would be a sort of stadium rock, I guess the kind of and then this much more grassroots thing comes out from the grassroots, but and then to some extent becomes well, in some cases becomes very popular, as you say, like top of the charts. But then so many others don't become. I mean, one of the kind of I guess notable things about touring so much with Attila the Stockbroker around Britain and in the past 20 years and getting familiar somewhat with the punk scene as it has existed and as it exists now in Britain, and realizing that there are so many musicians that actually were much more well known when they were teenagers or in the early 20s, in the late 70s and early 80s. And they're still making great music and touring. And you're a very prime example of that, making great music and touring. But would it be fair to say that that you probably had the most commercial success in the early 80s, like Attila did?
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a label, I had chart records, a few, and we were on TV programs and the whole kind of thing. But for a brief period, because that's what the music industry does. If they see you as a prospect that fits in, to the current popular trend, they grab you and they promote you in that way. The most important thing, and they've done it with bands since then and before then. And the most important thing is that you can hold your nerve when they drop you like a hot potato, when that wave has moved on and they're on to the next thing. And one of the unusual things about the punk rock movement, particularly in Britain, I think, was that it was the DIY ethic stayed with it. So that when all the label interest went away and all the big glitzy music business interest went away, a lot of us, we had that DIY thing in our kind of running through our veins. So we carried on doing it because we knew how. And actually, a lot of us weren't convinced by the music business even while we were in it. So so it's okay. So the label drops me, so I carry on writing songs. Okay, so they're not making my records. Okay, so I'm making myself. It took me a few years to really kind of get that DIY ethic back into my head. I did feel abandoned. I did feel sort of marooned for a few years, but it did come back, and I think for a lot of musicians were the same kind of mentality. Okay, they're not interested, but I'll do it anyway.
When you mentioned that those few years that when you did come back, and that, I mean, it just makes me think about how, I mean, I'm in my 50s, you're in your 60s, and we've both known a lot of people who have died. And, you know, it just seems like there's maybe, I think the numbers might actually even bear this out. I can't remember if somebody has collected these things, but, poets and musicians die young more often than a lot of people do. And I wonder if, I mean, it's actually like, when you think of it from a lot of people's perspective who are not in the music business in any form, whether grassroots or, a more grandiose level, um, I think the stresses of the work are not really familiar for a lot of people. But can you talk about that a bit?
Well, the stress, I think most of the stress, as far as I'm concerned, comes with the actual mechanics of touring because, the level we're doing at, as you know very well, you're not being driven around in a lovely, comfortable, limousine or in a tour bus or staying in the top hotels where you get a good night's sleep and being shepherded around by managers and tour managers and told where to go and what to do. Actually you have to do everything yourself. That is the which I've learned to like. I mean, I like organizing myself and organizing my own time, my own transport, my own hotels and my own flights and everything. But it is a strain. It is a stress. The mechanics we're getting from one place to the other, often on a very low budget. So for me, the most of the touring, the stress is involved in that. So I turn up at a gig sometimes, and I've made it by the skin of my teeth after one train got delayed, and I had to run across the platform with a suitcase full of merch, upstairs and downstairs trying to catch the next one, and then a tree falls across the line and you have to get off and you have to try and find a taxi to take you to another. All these scenarios happen and they all hurt and they all get you worried because you want to get to the gig. That's your whole day is based, get me to the gig. No one else is going to
Absolutely.
do it for you. You take it on board and you do it.
I wonder before we continue, do you think I could get you to sing a song? And I don't know if you'd be up for doing expensive being poor, but I was just thinking about the line in there about how you don't have a car. Is that still true? You don't tour with a car?
I take public transport.
Which is
Um,
actually, I mean, which for anybody listening here in the United States, the idea of touring by public transport sounds like some kind of the beginning of a comedy routine, like you're going to make a joke, because it's like impossible. It's totally impossible. But even in England, that's a challenge. I mean, with the trains and stuff. But
it can be a challenge. Yeah, I do it all through Europe, and
yeah, that's much
I've
easier.
kind of got to like it, because I've found, I've tried doing gigs in the car, and well, what the hell, you get caught in traffic jams, you have to park, you have to find places that's, and actually, I, I've kind of got into the vibe of public transport. I quite like going by trains. I like to, it's like sometimes it's the only time off I get in the whole day is to sit in a train and and either do some work or watch the scenery go by. So in a way, it's taken some doing, but I actually quite like that way of touring now.
What about just carrying the instrument around from one train to the next? Doesn't that like just totally destroy your back?
This is a problem, I mean, my brother, who's a luthier, has made me a very particularly thin guitar
Oh,
that
great.
is very light and
Nice.
actually comes into two parts if you take these four bolts out.
Excellent.
So I can stick it in a back sack and take it on board planes with me, because that was another issue, that I was getting treated like a criminal every time I went on a plane with a guitar. So I
Oh,
now
yeah.
hide it. I hide it in my backpack in
And is
two
that because
parts.
you're like in terms of taking it on and not destroying the guitar in cargo, or more in terms of immigration and them wanting to make sure you have all
They
your
wouldn't let me take it on board.
yeah.
So, and I've had at least twice I've had it destroyed in cargo.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I'll get a guitar that I can destroy myself, and I take it into two parts, and then I can take it on board with me, and I bolt it back together when I get to where I'm going.
And how many of us have had guitars destroyed by
Mm.
airlines and we didn't write a hit country song about it? Did you know there is a hit country
Yeah,
song called
correct. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I got sent that many a times
yeah,
after
me
a
too.
couple of times
I'm
mine got
really sick of
destroyed.
hearing that song.
I mean, the thing is, I just felt really, prejudiced against, because a guitar in a case doesn't take up any more room than the suitcase you're allowed to take. It's just a different shape, and this is really shapeism in its worst form. And I think,
Shapeism, yeah.
yeah, it fits in the locker. Why can't I take it on board? It's light, it fits in the locker, and it's just a different shape than your suitcase, So yeah. Anyway, there
Yeah,
was
it's
no
one
getting
of the.
around it. There was no getting around it. I once got pulled off at an airport by two armed guards when I said I wanted to take the guitar on board, and the guy who didn't like the look of me behind the desk said, "Right, we're calling in armed police," and which they did. And
So, on what basis? Just the way you're dressed, I guess,
well,
combined with the guitar.
yeah, he didn't like the look of me from the moment I walked in, and
Yeah.
and uh, it's like the queuing up for the theme ride at the theme park. You have to queue up to get into the holding pen before you go on the plane. And the situation was that if you got there early and queued up, you could go on board first. And if you go on board first, there's room for your guitar in the luggage rack. So I got really early. I queued up for an hour, and then to go into the holding pen so I could go first on board. And I was first up. I went in, the guy behind the desk who'd been eyeing me up said, "You're not going on with that." I said, "I am going on with it. I've queued up for an hour." And he said, "You're not." I said, "I am." He said, "I'm calling the police."
Oh yeah, questioning their authority. They really don't listen.
Yeah.
They have only a little bit of power, but they have to exercise it. They have power over your guitar. It's a lot of power.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Well, that's what happens when you go on with a pair of bleached trousers, looking like a punk, holding a guitar, and you catch a guy having a particularly bad day with a boring job.
Absolutely. When did you start touring as a solo artist? And you mostly tour with an electric guitar solo, right? Is
No,
that still true,
no,
or with an
no. The
acoustic?
only time I toured with an electric guitar was when my acoustic guitar got smashed the first time, and I had to use an electric guitar instead because that was the only other guitar I had. But
Right.
it's always been acoustic. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I
And
took quite a shock when I had to tour Finland with an electric guitar because I never taken one on the road with me, and I didn't even know how to play electric guitar. Really, I played it like an acoustic, and
oh, really?
that was made a quite surprising noise.
So on your albums, like on the albums when you're playing with a band, like most of your albums, you're who's playing the electric guitar?
Um, I I I've occasionally played electric guitar on
Uh-huh.
on my own albums, yeah, but I usually get to. Well, it depends what albums. I've always had different
Which one?
lineups
Yeah.
on different
How about
albums. I mean,
Generation Y? Who is that guitarist?
that was me. Yeah.
Well, that's a great guitarist. That's
Thank you.
You're a great electric guitar player.
Yeah, that was one of the few albums where I played everything actually.
Oh, well, that's interesting because that's also my favorite album of yours. Although I think there's still a couple I haven't heard because you're kind of scattered all over the internet on different platforms. You're one of those musicians that you don't find all in one place, as far as I know.
Yeah.
Which is that strategic?
Well, no, not at all. It's just
It's just
just
the
it's
opposite of strategic.
it's the DIY thing really. Is that when no label does has any particular interest in you, then you do whatever you can, and that often means that it's very what you do is scattered around a lot because you don't have a kind of you know
Yeah.
monolithic label placing you in front of people in the same place all the time. So I just do what I can.
I mean, that kind of also, but without the label telling you what to do and where to go. I mean, that also, there's a lot of freedom in there, even though, I mean, it's maybe freedom to starve, but it's
Mm,
also like, I mean, I know, I'm pretty sure we both know people who have, who are very financially successful musicians who play for thousands and thousands of people who tour around in tour buses and, can't go and meet their fans because it's like
mm,
potentially fatal. And
mm,
I mean, that's like, such a weird reality, and
mm,
I know so many of us are spending much of our lives sort of wanting to be in that
mm.
position, but then actually meeting people who are in that position, I'm not sure if I'd want to be in that position. And I
No.
wonder if you been where are you at with the glass half full half empty question at this point?
Well, it's a thing I always comfort myself with. When I do, occasionally get frustrated with the, lack of exposure. Is that when I really come down and think about it, I don't want to be exposed. I just want to write my songs and get on with my life and not. But, and I feel happy that I can go to the merch after the gig and talk to people and see them at the bar, and I can wander around without being sort of bothered by people. I mean, the worst that happens is that someone shouts out and says hello, I love your stuff or something, which is
Yeah,
great.
right, exactly. The
Lovely,
worst is like, can I take your picture with my,
yeah,
can we take a picture? I mean,
yeah,
yeah, no problem.
absolutely, yeah. Which I find a great privilege and nice feedback that you're doing something right. People like you enough to want to do that.
Yeah,
The trouble with like the big superstar reaction from the public is most of it's false. Most of what people are saying is they're liking you because you're famous, not because of what you do. It's like this mass hysteria. So a lot of the time, and I do know quite a few famous people and musicians, and I know that a lot of the reaction is for them is can be unpleasant because it's not based on reality. At
yeah,
least I know people come to see me in clubs. If it's only for 50 people, it's 50 people who want to see me because they like what I do. So I can have some kind of sensible conversation with them, afterwards, or if I see them around,
yeah,
because we're both on the same page. It's
yeah,
not some kind of fake celebrity-induced hysteria.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. But and then again, then there are also, as I know, people who are very well known musicians who also look at you as being like one of their favorite songwriters. I mean, I'm not one of the well known ones, but I mean, you just are. Everything you write, the catchiness of the phrases, that the choruses. I mean, it's like the verses are like choruses, and then the choruses are like, I mean, you are. I know I in terms of the songs that are earworms that just get in your head in a really good way. I mean, I don't know where I'm going with this, but can you just talk about the process of songwriting and how you come up with the stuff you come up with? I mean, I don't want to gush too much, but this stuff is people need to listen to your music. The power of the storytelling and the songwriting is right matched with the catchiness of it all and the musical freshness of, even though it sounds like so much of it sounds like classic punk rock kind of sound, it doesn't sound like something you've heard before, which is amazing to me that you can do that and do that for so many decades and do it with an acoustic guitar like this latest album, Lockdown Holiday. I've thought about actually doing an album just covering all your songs on this album because it would be fun to just do a different sort of interpretation of the same songs with an acoustic guitar. It just seems like such a weird idea. I might just
Mm.
do
I
that one of
like that.
these
Yeah,
days.
that's great. That's
But
one of the things about when a record's done, it's out there, and whatever happens, however other people interpret it. I've always loved hearing cover versions,
yeah, me too.
because other people always find another kind of aspect of it that you didn't find yourself, which is really interesting. And as
Mm,
far as like songwriting goes, that's what I loved when I was growing up. I loved, what was pop music? It was a chorus you could sing along with, and it was a melody that stuck in your head. That's what pop music was all about, and what it is really is pop music. And what that's how you convey your message. Pop music when I was growing up was throwaway. It was bubblegum, and yet that those words stuck in my head, even though they didn't have anything particularly to say. In a way, that's nice, a bit of escapism. But for me, then the opportunity to say, what I wanted to say, and convey it in a way that was enjoyable to hear, whether you could sing along with, and you know, and it had a chorus. It was going somewhere. It was compressed. It wasn't indulgent like those awful prog rock bands that were around before punk rock. It's just a trying to.
what were you listening to as a kid, as a young teenager?
Well, the Beatles,
Hmm.
for sure. Um, I guess I was brought up with the Beatles and the Stones and all those kind of, like all those Merseybeat bands, and um, the British charts were just stuffed with catchy tunes in the
Yeah,
60s. So even if there were bands you only heard once, I don't know, Unit 4 plus 2, or something, they're all, I can still hear the chorus of Concrete and Clay Beneath My Feet now. It's stuck in so hard, those great songs, or great melodies. Even, I don't know what that song was about. I have no idea.
right.
A load of rubbish probably, but the song itself stuck. So, I suppose somewhere at the back of my mind, I just wanted to have that, melody, the power of the melody in the chorus, and make it count with the lyrics.
Were you listening to John Peel's radio show on BBC when you were
Yeah,
a kid? Yeah, that
yeah,
was part of the
yeah,
part of
sure.
growing up too.
Yeah,
Was it
absolutely.
a was it a particularly was like when you first met John Peel and you were on his show? Was that an event in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was really thrilled to get the call to go and do the Peel show. Yeah.
When did you first start touring in Germany?
Um, I I was really in the doldrums in Britain. I was getting virtually no gigs at all, and I had a band called Cheap in the late '80s, and a German a guy in a German band called Garden Gang um, wrote me a letter and said we'd like to get the band over here because he was promoting gigs in his local area near Munich, and this was the early '90s, and I wrote him back and said, well, the band's broken up, but I'm doing a few solo gigs, trying them out. So he said,
Mm-hmm.
okay, come, we'll get you to do a couple of solo gigs supporting my band. So I went out there early '90s, and what struck me was while I was getting no interest at all in Britain, I went over to Germany and I did the gigs, and they were all asking me about the lyrics. They're saying, "What's that? What's that about? What was that line about this? Half." I thought, well, this is not my native language even, but they're really interested in the lyrics and they've got a really positive attitude towards the songs. So after that, I really started to concentrate a lot on going into Germany and the rest of Europe. You know, as you probably know, I went on tour then with Attila, the stockbroker, who was already had quite a flourishing reputation in Germany,
Yeah.
particularly East Germany. I didn't go there with him, but and things just kind of grew, developed in Germany, and then it kind of bounced back to Britain after that.
And the German sort of squatted social center scene,
Hmm.
especially in the
Mm.
early '90s, was
Yeah.
I would say, I guess that was probably the peak period of.
Mm.
I mean, the German autonomous scene has existed in many forms since
Mm.
the '80s, or I guess in using the term that I guess they started using the autonomen in the '80s, but this. But it's a thriving scene today. But in the early '90s, it was really, I mean, there were sometimes demonstrations with tens of thousands of Autonomen on the streets of Hamburg,
Mm.
and at the same time, which is, I don't know, it's kind of remarkable given the kind of tactics they were engaged with. This was not people marching down the streets with signs,
Mm.
and I wonder if just any random reflections of what it was like touring in Germany at that time.
Well, I think what really struck me was the incredible positive attitude that the audiences had. I mean, in Britain, there wasn't a scene, full stop. You could play in the local pub or you're a big pop band. There wasn't
That was it.
a,
That was basically the middle, what they call the middle range venues, just were just not happening. I mean, what
no.
happened to them? Or did they used to exist and they just weren't happening then, or was it just not a phenomenon in Britain? It's still a problem, isn't it,
It's
in
still a
Britain?
problem, yeah. It's not. I don't really know. I mean, at the time I was living in London, so there was a few places, but not much. And you got outside London or outside the major cities, and there was just nothing. Whereas over in Germany, well, every town had a little, you know, club run by enthusiasts, often with the support of the state, and the thing was, they took it, they grabbed the idea, and they were very enthusiastic and very sincere about it. And so you could turn up at one of these little clubs, you could play your gig, there was somewhere to stay afterwards. They had a band room. They'd feed you, they'd give you, alcohol and something to drink, and so you had everything you needed to have a good evening, really. And if you didn't get paid much, you were getting your expenses, you're getting somewhere to stay, and you could travel around. and present your music, which was that was all I wanted. I wanted to get out and play my songs. I couldn't do it in Britain. I could do it there. Things have developed much more here now. Well, of course, we're talking before COVID. Then we may well find that scene has been devastated all over after COVID, because it's going to be very hard for clubs to keep going. But we'll see.
Yeah, I've heard about clubs going under all over the place, especially
Mm,
in the United States and in Britain. But I've also heard, like, certainly in Denmark, that's not happening because they've
mm,
got a plan to keep them all going. But in Germany, it's more of a mixed bag, it sounds like.
yeah, in Britain, certainly they just leave musicians to hang.
Right?
We
Well,
never liked
so
you anyway. Goodbye.
I mean, here we have had some pretty impressive stimulus packages passed just as of like the past couple weeks, which I mean, it's actually pretty impressive for, especially for people with multiple children. It seems they're determined that those of us with kids are not going to be in poverty for the next year at least.
Mm,
Like,
yeah,
that's kind of nice. But
that's great. I mean, there's one good thing. At least Trump's gone, and there's some kind of positive support happening.
yes, at least there's some at least we're borrowing a lot of money to try to
Mm,
keep the whole. I mean, I don't know how much of social unrest they can actually put up with before they,
mm.
I think they're
Indeed.
clearly worried. They
Yeah,
they
yeah,
need to spend
absolutely.
money.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny how that money's there,
Yeah,
all along, as it turns out.
yeah,
And if it stops sort of armed revolution, an uprising on the streets, then somehow they can manage to find it and give us a bit back
yeah.
of our money.
Exactly, no doubt. Quite something, huh? So you
Mhm.
were just going to do a tour in Europe with Die Totenhosen, which
It's
is
got the
the boring pants, which
yeah,
basically the flaccid penises, if we're
the pants, yeah.
in German slang. But
Mm.
wonderful, man. And then instead you stayed home and got COVID-19. How was the COVID-19 experience? You and your partner both got COVID-19, huh?
Yeah, it was ugly, very
Yeah,
ugly.
it
Yeah,
was
I've been
bad.
out on tour with Stiff Little Fingers, and the Professionals, and in Britain we got 3 dates in, and I mean, right from the start, it was starting to look, is this tour, are we going to get through the month of this tour, and we were being told, the government advice was wash your hands a lot, and you'll be fine. Um, so we went out on tour, and after the first date, a few of the later dates in the month started getting pulled. Um, 2 days in, it became clear that the tour was not going to be able to carry on. We had one date left, and on the way to the final date, me and my partner stopped off for coffee, and someone sneezed in front of us, and that was it. Um, 3 days later, the tour was cancelled. We were back home in agony, not able to get out of bed. All the shelves stripped, so we couldn't even get any, medication.
Mm.
Um, so it was, yeah, and it was horrible. I've got to say, I've not really known anything like it. I know some people get away without any symptoms, but we both had very, very unpleasant symptoms, and the worst thing is the long COVID. We've both had like long bouts of fatigue over
Mm.
the past year, and still getting them sometimes.
So it's not like really serious fatigue, not like energy level is not nearly back like what it was.
It's sometimes it is,
Hmm.
but then sometimes I just get floored. I've got to go to bed now. You know, and I close my eyes and I don't wake up for an hour. Which
Yeah.
I've never been like. I know this is not. I've always been very high, kind of high energy type of person. So it's very unusual for me to have that happen. So I know it's not normal.
Yeah.
But
Would
I'm functioning all right, and I think those periods are getting less, and you just kind of push through. I did
yeah.
find having the vaccine brought it back a little bit, but it's a small price to pay. Everyone should go out and get vaccinated. It's the only way it's going to stop this.
Yeah. You got jabbed
And
yet
I got the
or
first jab, yeah,
uh-huh.
yeah.
Would you so you were on your website you were saying how you don't you weren't planning on writing this album. Do you normally not write and tour at the same time? Are these separate activities for you? Do you write or do you write
But
while you're
yeah, they
sitting in
are.
the train? They're
Yeah,
separate.
no, I can't really write until I've got done too
Oh,
much.
that's interesting. Why? I've so often write while I'm like, I mean, I shouldn't do it, but I'm not looking, but I'm like with one hand while I'm driving. I mean, that's so. What is it about writing that you need to be alone for that?
Yeah, I do
What?
need to be alone. I need to be, in a space where I can just concentrate on what I'm doing. I just find I can't write if I'm worried about the next connection or how I'm going to get to the hotel, or how I'm going to get to the venue, or you know, there's just too much else occupying my mind when I'm out on tour. I used to scribble, lines here and there, get a few ideas, and sometimes that still happens. But I find that writing goes through different kind of phases. Right? Like I've never written an album, in one go like that. Like Lockdown Holiday. That's never happened to me before. I've written a song and then had a little break, and then got some ideas for another one and started putting it together and got another song. But I've never actually sat down and written one song and then another one until the whole album's there over the course of a couple of months. I've never done that
Right.
before.
And it's really like kind of a themed album, really about the
Yeah,
lockdown COVID
yeah, yeah.
experience. Yeah.
Which I didn't expect to write. I mean, as I say, the previous album had come out a couple of years before, and my average rate is about one every 4 years. So that it was far from my mind to write another one. But that's a wonderful magic of songwriting is you don't go to them; they come to you.
Yeah, that's good. Would you do a couple songs for us,
Yeah,
perhaps?
absolutely. Yeah,
I'll change my role from interviewer to audio engineer.
right.
We can control these things now.
So we're going to have a go at Expensive Being Poor, aren't we? I think.
That'd be great.
And the car is off the road, but I never had a car. And I pay more for my food, cause supermarket's too far. It's expensive being poor, because everything costs more. Knocking on a closing door, it's expensive being poor. Someone throw me down some crumbs, I will eat them off the floor. It's expensive being poor, I look good when I get desperate. And the box is on the fritz, it's a black and white, or was. I tried taking it to bits, now the picture's just a grey fuzz. It's expensive being poor, because everything hurts more. Someone pick me off the floor. It's expensive being poor. How can I live with what I did when the cinema's £6? It's expensive being poor, I look good when I get desperate. Good times roll into a bottomless hole with your friends and future, my ideal home furniture. Let the trumpet sound as my house falls down, and the book begins to clear. I'm standing on the ground, and I'm standing on a path in an unknown part of town, and the path leads me away over hills and out of sight, in the blazing sun by day and the hanging moon by night. And I wind up in a place where I never have to count, and I never see the waves as I push my leaking boat out. It's expensive being poor, because everything hurts more. Knocking on a bolted door, it's expensive being poor. Someone throw me down some crumbs, I will eat them off the floor. It's expensive being poor, I look good when I get desperate. Desperate, desperate.
Incredible. TV, The Lucky Ones. Did you actually write that before you wrote other songs on Lockdown and Holiday, or is that?
That's the first one, yeah. That the songs on the album come out in exactly the order I wrote them in. So I was intending that to be the whole kind of encapsulation of what was going on at the time, not expecting to keep writing. But when I got to the end of that one, I realised there was more to say. So, I kept going. But that was the first one that came out. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, interesting. That makes perfect sense. It sounded like that too, and I don't remember if I actually read that or just it just felt like that was how it was,
Right.
all going in order like that. Would you do that one for us?
Absolutely, yeah.
Great.
After a winter of rain, they're emptying the shells again. The walls are falling in. I'm taking a homebound train, my tail between my legs, a head full of hopelessness. Nobody ever suspects it. We're already infected. Sometimes it's hard to believe it. It's hard to believe it. It's hard to believe it. But we are the lucky ones. The lucky ones. Sometimes it's hard to believe it. It's hard to believe it. It's hard to believe it. But we are the lucky ones. First car to Bristol and then in the car to Birmingham. One sneeze in a service station, that's where my calendar ends. As for the government's ideological fight, I'm hearing the words of the left spouting out of the mouths of the right. Sometimes it's hard to believe it. It's hard to believe it. It's hard to believe it. But we are the lucky ones. The lucky ones. Sometimes it's hard to believe it. It's hard to believe it. It's hard to believe it. But we are the lucky ones. Normal laws are broken down. We shop by stealth. The streets are free for vermin now. It's each man for himself. Meanwhile, in some refugee camp, without any water on tap, the world has turned its back. You could get sick just like that. We metaphorically wash our hands, complain about the holiday plans, but if you simply accept it, you're already infected. Sometimes it's hard to believe it. It's hard to believe it. It's hard to believe it. But we are the lucky ones. The lucky ones. Sometimes it's hard to believe it. It's hard to believe it. It's hard to believe it. But we are the lucky ones. The lucky ones. The lucky ones. The lucky ones.
Absolutely brilliant. And let me change your mic settings. Okay, yeah, there we go. We won't have any more echoing happening now.
Mr. Producer.
Yes, switching hats now from producer back to interviewer. Oh man, fantastic! And This morning I got an email from somebody in London about doing a gig there in the fall, and that's the first email I've gotten about doing a gig from somebody who's actually organized gigs before
Mm,
for 1 year and 1 month.
mm.
Have you
Yeah.
been getting any emails like that?
Well, I've had some gigs set up and pushed forward again, and
Uh,
I don't. I personally think the fall's too early, but according to our roadmap out of this situation, by the end of June, everything's going to open up. I can't see it myself. I think it's there's times you sit on the plane and you're sitting on the runway and the captain says we're going to be taking off in 10 minutes, and half an hour later he says
yeah,
we're going to be taking off in an hour. I personally think it's that, and I hope I'm wrong, but
so
very
you're not
hard to
making
pick.
any plans.
Uh, well, I'm still taking gigs, but I just, my whole kind of attitude is now whatever happens happens. If something gets booked, and I kind of expect it to not happen, and if it does, great. I
How does
think.
that even work? I mean, I know most people don't even know how it works in normal times with
Mm,
booking gigs, but how
mm.
does that work under these circumstances? I mean, there are venues actually making plans and booking gigs and then telling you, oh, it's not going to happen. I didn't even realize that was going on.
Well, there's been various kind of rules come in with the social distancing. So some venues have been figuring they can do things with 4 people at one table and then 2 meter gap, and 4 people from the same kind of family unit, or so there've been some attempts, always very low capacity, of course. They're just, people are so hungry for
Yeah.
gigs and actually in one of the gaps where things did ease off a bit, I did go and do 2 gigs in Ipswich in a beer garden, table seated only, with table service, with all the tables spaced apart, which was weird. But at least it was a live gig. That's the only gig I've played in a year myself.
That was the
So
one in Ipswich. It's
yeah,
a
yeah,
suburb of London, right? And this is a
not a suburb, but
is it
yeah,
it's
not
far
too,
enough away. It's its own town,
about
is it?
a half hour out on the train. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we did 2 nights there, or 2 afternoons there, to make it kind of worthwhile and to fit everyone in.
And
Um,
they had limited the number of people who could even come in the first place, I
yeah,
imagine, right?
absolutely.
There
Very,
were people probably who wanted to come who couldn't come to the
yeah.
gig.
Well, I think over the 2 nights we covered it. It's not a huge town,
Mm,
and it was outdoors. So there were different rules for outdoors as indoors. So people have been trying things, on that kind of basis. So I had a gig book in Blackpool, and then the week before, the new lockdown measures came in, so that was cancelled.
mm-hmm.
I've had probably 10 or 20 gigs booked in and then cancelled again on, over the last 6 months, and I continue on that basis really. Although people are now so wary that we've all kind of pretty much agreed, well, when we see a clear way out of here, then we'll start booking gigs, and until then, it's really been a bit of a waste of time. I had lots of gigs that have now been postponed 3 times.
Wow. And then when, assuming gigs do start up again with indoors and all that, I mean, with your experience with COVID and especially long COVID and all the unknowns about whether you can get it again in another with another strain and all that. I mean, I know you're not an epidemiologist, but I still
Not my
can't say that word.
speciality, no.
But but what are you? You must be worried, but how worried are you about the idea of playing indoors again? You want to try to do it anyway, regardless of if it's going to start up again. You're gonna dive in.
Yeah, I'll dive in. I mean, I'll take the second shot, and after that, you have a, you have a 90% plus, protection, and it's highly unlikely that you'll die. That's what the vaccine will give you. Even if you get ill, you're not going to die. I mean, and because I've had COVID, I suppose I'm in a kind of slightly different mindset than people who haven't. It was very, very unpleasant. I'll take all the precautions, and I will take the vaccine. Both shots, and if it's considered safe enough to have gigs, and then I'll give them a go. But I don't see we're in that scenario yet myself, you
Yeah.
know, because all the audience have got to be in that position as well. You know, the
Yeah, they
audience
got to
got to
be.
have their shots. You know, they've got to be safe. I'm not going to do something that will put other people in danger just because they foolhardy.
Yeah.
So I want to see the numbers. I want to see the numbers of COVID really, really low before we start risk doing gigs again.
Yeah.
It's really sticky. You know, no one's had this experience before. No one knows what
Yeah.
to do. My basic kind of like outlook is I don't know. You know, you got to stay flexible. You got to be prepared to adapt for whatever happens. You know, but it's been like a kind of life education, really. In that sense, for a lot of people. You know, I've had a year where the wheels have stopped rolling underneath me. I've had time to think, reflect, write, enjoy some of the pleasures of normal life that I don't get when I'm constantly on the road.
Is that the
And I've
first
also,
time you've had this much time off in your entire adult life, basically?
no, I mean, I was,
Or
I
no?
was, I was dead in the water in the 80s. No one wanted to book a
Okay.
gig from TV Smith at all. So but then that
Mm-hmm.
was boiling frustration because I couldn't do anything at all. But
Wow.
certainly since gigs started, up for me, and and I became slightly in demand again. But certainly for 30 years,
30
maybe.
years. Yeah. Right.
I mean, I haven't had a chance to kick back like this, even if it was enforced. So it has made me, certainly look at my life again and look at the circumstances of the world again. And
Has
personally,
all the time off gotten easier over time? I mean, was it more stressful at the beginning, or is it you get kind of
I,
into the swing of it,
you know
or
what?
you just?
I didn't find it stressful at all.
Mhm.
I got back here and I got when I could get out of bed. We were in lockdown. I could hear
So it
the
was a
birds.
lockdown holiday.
It was a lockdown. Yeah, I mean, I'm not making this stuff up. I mean, I came out and I could hear the birds singing. There was no traffic on the streets. It's like, well, wait, just a minute, we're getting back to some actual real values here. You try and find the positive in these things, and I've really felt there was a lot of positivity, in the situation. Pollution cleared up. The people would, I mean, real things. Con, uh, relating to each other in a real way, being compassionate to each other, worrying about each other, caring for each other. I mean, they've got a lot more selfish now as the years drawn on, and people are thinking a bit more me again. But
Mhm.
I found there were many positives in it. And one thing that philosophically for me is that I've learned just to think, okay, well, whatever happens, happens. I'm going to adapt to it, and we're going to see what happens. And I stop trying to force the agenda and make the world fit to what I want it to be. I think
Yeah.
we've been forced to recognize that we don't have that much control actually.
And, on that note, as a musician who's been working for a very long time as a musician, um, having recently interviewed a guy who wrote a book called The Death of the Artist, a local guy named Bill Derizowitz, a wonderful book came out last October. And it basically like documents the music and so many other scenes, basically everything other than television. It documents television too, but that basically television is the only sort of thriving art form on a commercial level, and in television people make an average of 50% what they made 20 years ago. But in music, the music industry as a whole, globally, is 20% the size that it was 20 years ago, at least between 97 and 2017. It's grown a little since then, but it fell apart completely at
Mm,
every level, and on a commercial level. And I mean, and we both, worked our way through that whole period, and
mm, mm,
I just wonder what reflections you have on this. I mean, you used to. I mean, you talk about how hard it was to get a gig in the '80s, but at least in the '80s, you could sell records, and if you had a gig, and
mm,
keep money from the record sales, unless you were on a label that was taking all the money. But at least there was the possibility, especially in the '90s, of recording your own CDs and then selling them, and it was like a transactional thing that seems like a fantasy in retrospect. Now that, I
mm,
mean, I don't know if you're still selling albums. I know some people are managing to
mm.
still sell physical merch, but it's
Yeah.
nothing like it was 20 years ago, right?
No, for me, it's better. You know,
Really?
yeah,
Oh, tell us about that. How do you do that? Just
well,
by not putting all your stuff online?
I mean, it is available online, but there's I just find that you know, at gigs, people want to say thank you and they want to buy the record from you. And I've, you know, and I've, until a year ago, I was doing an enormous amount of gigs. I mean, I believe you were too. I mean, you know, I
Hmm.
got to do 120 gigs a year, and at every gig, I'd go and stand at the merch afterwards and talk to people, and they'd see what I had to sell, and you know, and often as not, they'd buy it, or some would, certainly enough to, you know, to make it work every night. And I
And
don't
that
know, you
hasn't
know, I mean, I guess
gotten much
maybe
worse.
I'm the exception to the rule, but you know, I found, and maybe it's because things were so bad for me in the 80s, you know, and yet I had that kind of reputation of you know, for being, you know, a punk star, you know,
Hmm.
from the 70s, you know, which has kept, you know, and I kept writing, I've kept producing what I believe to be good stuff, and people seem to like it. So, you know, I agree with you that we've had no help, but I've, you know, all those kind of elements that worked against me in the 80s, which meant I couldn't get any gigs, and I couldn't put anything out. You know, with just sheer kind of hard graft, they seem to have turned around and started to work in my favor. I think you
How's
have to
the
go, you know, you have to kind of slip between the, you know, through the net and find your own way of doing it. It's really is still the DIY ethic, you know.
Very much so, yeah.
When they tell you can't do it, you just go and do it anyway.
You just do it anyway, huh? And
Mm.
what about your relationship with so-called social media, or what I like to call anti-social media? Has
Mm.
been
Yeah.
what's been that what's been that like for you?
Reluctant engagement, I suppose. You know that you know, but in because of the fact I can't go out and do live gigs, I've reluctantly, as you know, as a similar to Attila the stockbroker, I've gone onto Facebook to do live gigs there, just because it is a platform really that where a lot of people watch you,
Yeah,
um, and you know, I find it an appalling. You know, I
are you
do.
getting used to like finishing a song and then hearing silence? That's such a
Yeah,
weird thing.
yeah, you do kind of get used to it, and again, it's been a question of adapting. You know, what my latest project has been to do request shows, so which has meant over the course of 8 weeks, I've now done 160 something different songs from the, you know, from the 40 years of songwriting, which has
Wow.
been interesting for me because I've gone back and revisited songs that, you know, I'd either forgotten about, or, you know, you do a gig, you do an hour's worth of songs, and you tend to do more or less the same songs every
Right.
night, you know, which means
Right.
maybe I'll do 20 or 30 songs a night, but there's hundreds of other songs out there that when I go back and look at them, actually, I think, well, that's a good song. You know,
Yeah.
why can't that one appear as well? And the thing about playing on your own in the studio to a screen, you know, you can't hear them booing and walking out, so it's worth a risk.
There's that. At least there's the I never thought about the positive aspect of it. That's true, because you just think about a good gig and where everybody's listening with rapt attention, and then afterwards they all go nuts. But of course, yeah, you also don't have to listen to the bar staff talk about the latest football game while you're
That's
trying to do a love song.
That's right. Yeah, and you know, and people do. You know, there is a thing about a live gig where, you know, you do, of course you aim it towards the hits at the end, and you have to have the, you know, get them interested at the start. And there's a certain pattern to it, and but by not having a live audience in the room, you can actually stretch that format. You know, which has been another positive for me from the whole situation, is to stretch a format, and you know, and find other ways of doing it, find new songs, you know, revisit old songs. You know, it's interesting. I think there's
Yeah.
always a way of pulling something positive out of the negative.
Yeah, you can be sure that with this broadcast, there'll be people saying, "Oh, he starts singing at 38 minutes." Go to, they have a life afterwards, unlike live gigs, which,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah, indeed. Well, all the stuff that I've done on, you know, on the live stuff on Facebook is still on the page. You know,
yeah.
I've done every week was hour and a half
Oh, great.
of live stuff, and I've put stuff on YouTube, live sessions on YouTube. It's all free to views.
And a couple of great videos from the latest album on YouTube as well.
Yep, yep,
Yeah.
some nice videos too. Yeah, which were also all homemade. Me and Sally, my partner, we went out and filmed them on our own. I edited them at home. There's the
Yeah, they
DIY
look
thing
like
is still there.
great. They looked like fun to make, and
Yeah.
yeah,
I'd never done that before either, so that was another thing that came out of it.
yeah, excellent. TV, thanks so much for joining me. It's been really great.
Yeah, it'd be great to chat with you,
Pleasure
Dave.
talking to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hope to see you on the other side of the vaccination process and all that.
Yeah, well, we'll
We'll
stay
see.
positive, and I'm sure things will get back to some point. If we don't rush it, we will be out there gigging again.
Yeah. Take care, TV. Talk to you
You,
soon.
you too. Cheers.
And thanks everybody for tuning into this conversation with TV Smith. Check out tvsmith.com. You can find this archived at my YouTube channel, youtube.com/drovics. And you can find this in podcast form on Patreon, on SoundCloud, and wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, and all the other usual platforms for podcasts. If you look up This Week with David Rovics, there. And I'll be back. And until then, remember, mutual aid will get us through. Don't pay your rent unless you really have to, and trust your neighbors. Bye for now.